Shirley here with SRA Talisman. This is Mercury, our Mars day. Yeah, it is Mars day. Well, the funny thing is, I actually, of course, did decide to do. Yeah, the moon was sitting in a particular point for me, and I tried to accentuate them both. Midway into making the oil, there was somebody speaking in Dutch that was not liking this, and I don't know why. That was kind of like the bad part. Um, the first one I did was just had to do with something I already made when Venus was on Deneb Algety, and I just consecrated at this time, and that was okay. I tried to make a soap and I forgot. There was something about forgetfulness and dissociation um, that happened. So I don't know why. Um, Again, personal biases could have been the Venus squaring my Chiron, and it has to do with dissociation. What prompted me to do that was listening to the interview of Annika Lucas, and because it's for personal use, it was a part of the consecration for the candle. Um, and this is, yeah. So I was just listening to the end of the interviews, particularly when she talks about the ability to heal and to be out of basically extortion cults. And I just allowed that to play while inscribing. And the fact that it is a wax candle allowed that inscription to be, or that engravement to not be, um, how should I say it? It was not an act of violence to create this talisman because the surface was soft, and I was just using a pencil to write the symbols of Venus. So I tried to pay attention to those details, and it was like kind of like should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And I'm like, okay, that was playing. I was paying attention to the omens in the background. Um, the cat was insisting to sleep beside my mom. And I said, okay, let's go for it. So it's unusual consecration. Again, the moon is leaving an opposition with Uranus. Venus is ruling Uranus. So the unexpected, controversial. Then I tried to do an oil, and I've already pre-prepared the oil itself, which is made by, um, yeah, and the oil itself is actually with mellow. I just need to check if the oil is good, because there, and this is where I got the problem. Somebody was saying something, and
Hello, my name is Carrie
and
Parker.
again,
I'm 54 years old,
probably
and
either it had to do with the oil, so I'm
in
gonna
2
have
months
to
on
check that the oil is good.
I was the caregiver, the main
Um,
caregiver to my son through a
and
year
that
of
was
kidney
playing
dialysis and
a
kidney transplant.
Venus
Um,
invocation, and
I took
then there
care
was
of my
something
mother.
that forgetfulness came, and it was about uniting distant poles with love, and it sounded like a church song, but there was a Star of David there, and I'm like, okay, all religions should abolish ritual abuse. That was basically kind of like the basis for that union. And then I remember that the first decan of Pisces with Venus can be alliances between distant poles, or alliances or benevolence from enemies. And with the moon in the sixth house, benevolence from enemies can be a good thing, but I think that it may be the oil that was rancid, so I'll need to check that one. So the oil one did not work as well. Although that was where I majorly invested the essential oils, and shit like that can happen. Again, there was an element of dissociation. Um, I don't know if it is Venus Rahu already or Mercury Rahu could be creating that. Mercury fallout would give that this psychic awareness. And then there was the soap, which is the last thing I consecrated. I managed to melt some bases for soap, but I forgot to put essential oils there. And I couldn't write anything. So the candle was the perfect one. Um, and I was trying to combine my own kind of artistic difference or artistic expression. Um, when we consecrate a talisman, we basically put it around the energy, or we create around the omens, and then we light fire to sort of unify. Um, and yeah, it's only one candle. So, and then I did the invocation for Selene and the invocation for Venus, which was uniting distant poles with love, and it was sounding like a church choir, but it had a Star of David. I know I was talking about the Judeo-Christian separation, so somebody in the background may have had, I don't know, agendas regarding that. But I just took it to benevolence, even to finding to still have benevolence even within enemies. Okay, so even if somebody's coming from a distant pole or far away country, doesn't have to be enemies, but the moon here can signify. It can also be colleagues, because the moon can be in that position. Again, it is a challenge with the Mars. It's Mars day, and Mars is in the 8th house, and it can be conflict around the cult. Yeah. So definitely, I saw certain things. The oil I used was not. But this reminds me of something. One of the talismans that I ordered, I still kept it even though the oil came out rancid. Um, yeah, I still kept it even though the oil came out rancid, because I was just like looking at the talisman itself. So I'm going to see what this one does. It's just kind of like not to put on the body probably. But I'm going to see what it does as a talisman. And by the way, the reason I didn't ask to replace it is because I was already discussing another issue, and I just didn't want to bombard with emails. So I'm like, well, I ordered it as a talisman. I'll just let it be as a talisman. um, and then there was the soap that I forgot to put essential oils. Now here's the funny thing: it switched from Venus hour to Mercury hour, and then I put honeysuckle because I prepared honeysuckle and rose. So I had honeysuckle oil because it kind of smells like jasmine, which is and it's a flower. So I'm like, hey, that flowers Venus. Um, but then it turned into the first soap. First, I forgot to put oil, and then it was already switching to Mercury hour. So I said, okay. And then I just poured in the rest of the mix, and I put the oil to the rest of the mix, which I don't know if it's enough to be smelling, but anyway. Then I have a pen here, again, personal use, just to see how it works, and I try to see if I'm going to smell the oil, so I mix it with a pen. And the pen is such a mercury device. But then I see that accidentally the oil spilled on the soap that I stopped making when the hour turned from Venus to Mercury. So a lot of mishaps, just like real life factory. Okay, somebody is urgently, you said, oh, get the device, get a pen. It sticks the pen into the soap. And I was wondering, should I consecrate a Mercury talisman with formaldehyde Um, but since it squares my Rahu, I decided to give up the idea. Now this Venus is squaring my Chiron, and indeed there were little details. Okay, the oil that was rancid with, mind you, rose essential oils is one of the most expensive things. But this is exactly what Venus, as the ruler of Uranus, can bring. It's kind of like, should I, shouldn't I, shouldn't I? Okay, let's try it. Non-conventional way to prepare a talisman. A lot of things, good things, bad things, challenging things on the way. And then Saturn here in the 9th house, 29 degree, is kind of like, is she going to pay attention to the fact that the oil is rancid? When is she going to come to her senses and realize she stirred the soap with a pen? That candle was definitely first being prepared when Venus was around Denebalgidi. Um, and the funny thing where where I begin to remember that it also happened that I ordered a talisman and it came out rancid, and I said, well, it's a talisman. Um, and by the way, the talisman had to do with eloquence and speech, so it seems to work. Okay, it's just kind of like, hey, if it's rancid, don't put it on the body. Um, but other than that, it might be used as a talisman. And then I forgot to put essential oil in the soap. And actually, I remember now, only now remember, was another company. I ordered a talisman, and it was a Venus Moon talisman. Um, Wonderful talisman, fantastic talisman. I did not smell the oils at all. And I can tell because the next time I ordered that one, I did smell the oils. And I just, only now I think about it, that the very same mistakes that happened to me right now were the mistakes that were happening when I was ordering talismans myself. Kind of a reminder that mistakes can happen along the way, but it doesn't prevent us from doing something creative or even going commercial with that creation. Um, Again, sixth house, eighth house is occult, sixth house can be house of work. Um, Venus, I didn't accentuate Mercury. Um, and the reception between the first and the sixth house here can actually be reconciling and coming to senses of the realistic things that happen um, even around the founding of whether it's occult teachings, talismans, and the second Lord in the eighth. The skill basically here is the skill of talismans making. Um, and again, those that rule the eighth go back to the ninth, so that debate becomes a teaching. Again, would I recommend that as an election, as a prescribed election? Normally, all this mess in the eighth house and in the sixth would say, but then Moon in reception with Jupiter and Venus, Moon in connection with Venus, Venus exalted in Pisces, 0 degree Pisces, basically the Pisces of Pisces. Um, Saturn is so far away from Venus, and Saturn, um, how should I say that? Oh, Mars is ruled by Saturn, but The ruler Jupiter is at the sign of the moon, and there is reception. Um, very strong moon, exalted Venus, and Jupiter is exalted at the sign of the moon, which allows us a union of day sect and night sect. Possible benevolent results. Also to my conflict with myself. One oil came out rancid. Oh wait, but I ordered the rancid oil, and as a client, I was just like, well, it's a talisman and it works. I ordered it as the talisman. And the other one, I forgot to put the scent. And I'm like, well, I ordered a talisman that they forgot to put the scent. It was an amazing talisman, fantastic talisman. And guess what? I even used it on my body, even though they forgot to put, or there was not enough of the oil there. Still worked amazing as a talisman. And I made those particular and exact mistakes myself when creating something that I didn't believe I would ever um, go commercial with. To be very honest, when sold as curio, I'm not going to sell this one, these are for me, but when sold as curio, if I just say don't use the oil, that's actually a product. This is for the business owners there, or prospective business owners there. Okay? If I say, hey, that one came out with less scent, you don't smell the oil we use, but we don't smell the oil, and the goal is the talisman is still working, amazing. If it for the soap, if it's like a business soap, then there are a lot of lines where they can have a discount or something like that. And if I would have a line of oils that are usable, I could still sell this one as a curio, as a talisman, just to make sure that nobody uses that oil. And from the context, I see that it will probably still work. Um, in fact, this episode shows that at least on my thinking, it already had. So again, always pay attention to the omens that arrive. Anything Venus, as long as now we're gonna have that with what we have now with Venus, we're gonna have with Mercury. It's gonna get even quicker and even more steered soap with with a pen. Okay, which simply, if it's a talisman, it simply means I sell it as a curio. Anyway, I don't have the health ministries. By the way, I dealt with that as an aromatherapist. The health ministry doesn't give approval. There would be something that would need, which delayed um, my going full commercial. And but when something is sold as a curio, it doesn't serve as a soap. And when I tell people, hey, that thing was not made in hygiene conditions that would be compatible to, let's say, use on the body. These are the different requirements. Then that thing would be definitely good with the, of course, with the pros and the cons of the election. So definitely it had already shifted my mindset, and the exact same mistakes, this one, it could not be more accurate. Um, this Mercury fallout was doing something in the background. And here is another thing. I was thinking about trauma informed business. While I was making it, I had dissociation because when I was putting the Venus invocation, it was almost like an argument that fell into dissociation, and I didn't know exactly what is it in this invocation because I never put it before. And then another dissociation I had, I think when I was making the soap, and and I forgot to put. Now it was both because I was in a hurry, but it's also kind of like those dissociation that happen also with trauma, and a lot of the difficulties to actually have an income has to do with the dissociation that happens following satanic abuse. Yes, I'm talking about astrological talismans as a form of curation. Again, I'm not saying that this is a product that cures satanic abuse. I'm saying that the context is curation because those things were definitely used in satanic abuse and not satanic abuse. Okay, they use astrological elections for many things, and there I have a beginning of what could a business that is trauma informed by people that recover from ritual abuse and what they call spiritual warfare. Fuck that. That's pedo rings, trafficking, and the use of religion or spirituality to gaslight around that. Um, you're like, what is spiritual warfare? What? I'm a secular person. What to me is oh, that's when they rape people in the astral. So, and it's um, very almost mythical how this thing come about um, where the antidote is taking all of these things, whether it's the astrology, the song that had the Star of David and sounded like a church choir, um, the the oil that yeah, and all of that in a never not the conventional way to make a talisman. Again, I didn't fast for 2 weeks before. I didn't even think I would make that talisman in the previous video that I recorded. Um, and I stirred the remnants of the soap in the mercury hour with the pen. So, um, and I had dissociation twice while making in the making of this. This definitely is the beginning of a framework of something that is um, ritual abuse, trauma informed form of making a living in a way that doesn't harm anyone. Okay, when the product is sold as a curio, yeah, I'm not saying I can be like a big commercial. We still need housing first. I would still need to take into account that sometimes I would have things to process and I would need, I don't know, to sleep or that sometimes I'm being attacked and I shout and so on and so forth. But this was already assembling something that could be turning into something. And of course, with those basis things, there can also be, paintings or art or creation. The way that they created art, to be very honest, it's nobody talks about that, but the art was a form of veneration. We just need to take um, the slavery, rape, trafficking, and satanic abuse based economy, religion, and everything out of the working sector. Um, which is a form of healing. Again, talisman is always about alchemy. Um, and the understanding that our work or residence should not be including of abuse, let alone our life or relationships.